Back in the late 90s, early 2000s, comics weren't doing too good. So, to get all those new readers of the next generation, Marvel had an idea. An idea to bring all 60-something years of comic history and smash it together into one thing and sieve it all down to the important bits and bring it into the modern age. This idea was called the Ultimate Universe, and began with Ultimate Spider-Man in 2000. And you can actually watch my video on Ultimate Spider-Man if you click on the link in the top right. Written by Mark Millar, with art by Brian Hitch, this is The Ultimates Volume 1. The book opens up over the North Atlantic in 1945. Paratroopers are waiting to be deployed and are talking about a supposed German superweapon that they are sent to try and destroy. So they're talking about how morale's low and cigarettes or something. But eventually, Bucky Barnes, in this universe, is just a photographer who follows Captain America around, tells them about the Allies' own secret weapon. Then one of the soldiers named Kowalski, who looks a lot like Sergeant Horvath from Saving Private Ryan, starts making fun of Bucky and tells him that Captain America is just a phony. And then, in a dark corner of the plane, Captain America basically tells Kowalski to shut the hell up. Also, in this universe, Steve is engaged to a woman named Gail, and he looks at the picture of her he keeps and invites all the soldiers to his wedding in a couple months, before the jump happens. So, the paratroopers land outside a massive, high-tech Nazi lab. Then it's basically sci-fi D-Day. Kowalski is running for cover when a bullet flies through his helmet. Somehow... Wait, this is just like the scene from Saving Private Ryan, except in this version he doesn't get, immediately shot. A grenade goes off and he, falls to the ground. He calls for a medic, and Bucky, who knows how to treat a bullet wound, rushes over, and Kowalski starts trashing Captain America again. And he's like, "Where's Cap now, huh? I don't see him doing anything. He's probably dead." And Bucky's like, "No, just look up. He's in that plane that's circling around about to crash into the fucking fortress." And that's exactly what it does. Cap slams the plane into the side of the building and does a sweet roll before kicking Nazi ass. Then he shouts to his fellow soldiers, "What are you waiting for, ladies? Christmas?" Before leading the charge. Once inside, the soldiers find a massive rocket bay. Bucky wonders aloud how the German technology is so advanced compared to America, and Cap tells him that there's more sides fighting in this war than anyone will ever know. Ooh, foreshadowing. The Nazis begin the blast-off sequence, and Cap runs towards the rocket and leaps on. The Nazis then surrender while Cap rides the rocket like Major Kong and Dr. Strangelove. As the rocket continues higher and higher into the sky, Cap talks with Bucky as he tries to sabotage it. Bucky's like, "Cap, you can't do, what are you gonna do? What's happening?" Cap's like, "Don't worry, chum." Then he pulls a grenade out and jams it inside the rocket, blowing it up and sending him right into the ocean. Cut to modern-day New York City. Nick Fury and Bruce Banner are eating at a restaurant and talking about all the damage Banner did months ago as the Hulk at some docks or something. And then Fury brings up the super soldier serum. A major plot device in the Ultimate Universe. It's the reason that Peter Parker is Spider-Man and Banner is the Hulk. Everybody and their fucking mother wants to recreate the super soldier serum. And then Fury tells Banner that the US government has given $50 million to the super soldier program, and that the program is relocating to Manhattan. But Banner will be number 2. Who was number 1, you may wonder? Number 1 is none other than Hank Pym. Cut to the former Super Soldier Program building. Hank is using ants to move the boxes out while Janet walks inside. So Janet and Hank talk about all the different ideas Hank has been coming up with, including a Giant Man formula. Then they talk about this S.H.I.E.L.D. team that they're a part of. The team is gonna be Janet, Hank, Bruce Banner, and Tony Stark, who told Fury that S.H.I.E.L.D. could have Iron Man on their team. Because you see, the purpose of these 4 scientists is to create various super soldiers for superhero teams or something. Cut to New York again. Tony Stark is flying around in his Iron Man suit before landing at Stark Tower. And what I like about this armor is that it's a big fucking suit of armor. Tony has to have an entire crew help him get in and out of it, which I think is actually a pretty cool idea. So Tony and Fury talk about the new team and walk around Stark Tower before Tony leaves to go have lunch with the president, then to go to a takeover meeting, and then go get drinks with Cameron Diaz. Hey, we're cutting to the Triskelion, which is still under construction. Janet greets Banner and she leads him to the lab. Once inside, Banner finds Hank getting ready for his Giant Man trial. Hank tells Banner that he is worried about the growing not stopping at a maximum of 60 feet, because if he doesn't stop growing after 60 feet, his skeleton won't support his body mass and he'll die. The trial begins and Hank begins to grow, ripping out of the suit. Why the fuck would you wear the suit if you're just gonna rip it? What did you think would happen? What, did he just not want people to see him naked? It doesn't seem to bother him a few panels later when he is 59 feet and 11 inches tall and naked. An unknown amount of time later, Bruce is at home talking with Fury about how he feels insignificant to Hank and how he hasn't made any progress with the serum when Hank's already made like 2 different heroes. But Fury tells him to pop open a bottle of champagne because S.H.I.E.L.D. found a frozen Captain America. Cut to some beachside. Janet is filming Hank in his leather Giant Man suit. Then Hank walks over to her and talks about how excited he is about them both becoming superheroes. But the conversation is cut off when Janet gets a text from Tony Stark. It's probably a dick pic or something. So Bruce Banner and the other doctors eventually revive Cap. A few hours later, he's lying in a hospital bed and wakes up to Bruce's big, creepy mug. Then they proceed to tell Cap that 57 years have passed, and Cap proceeds to kill or incapacitate all the people in the room before leaping out of the window. Janet and Hank, who just got back, see Cap running away from all the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. So Hank gets big and holds down Cap with his hand. Later, after Cap is calmed down, Fury takes him to go see his good old pal Bucky Barnes, who Steve learns married Gale. Also, when Cap was freaking out, he broke Fury's nose, and Fury makes a little joke about his nose being smashed more times than Robert Downey Jr.'s. So Steve and Fury go inside, and Bucky finally looks at Steve and realizes who he is. Then they hug, and Bucky starts tearing up. And it's a nice little reunion, and then Steve tries to go see Gale, but she doesn't want him to see her as an old woman, so they leave. Then Fury takes Steve to a cemetery, where Steve visits his father, mother, and brother's graves. Steve looks over to Fury and tells him that they should have just left him frozen because everything he once loved is gone. But Fury tells him that not everything is gone, before pointing to an American flag. Cut to the grand opening of the Triskelion. Fury is walking in with Betty Ross, who is the head of PR for the Ultimates. Later in the party, Fury, Janet, and Hank are talking to the president. Yep, it is George W. Bush. So Bush walks over to Steve and says,
"Well, what's your verdict on the 21st century, Captain America? Cool or uncool?"
Cap turns around, revealing his new uniform. He salutes the president and tells him it is definitely cool. A month later, Tony and Shannon fucking Elizabeth are on a space shuttle doing zero-G shit, and Tony is doing an interview with Larry King about Tony being both a CEO and a superhero. Then we go to Steve's old, shitty, rundown neighborhood. Steve is walking with Janet, who was helping him pick out new clothes, and she's being a little flirty. Then they walk up the stairs and find that someone broke into Steve's apartment. Back at the Triskelion, Bruce and Betty are standing around waiting for a televised training exercise that no one is at except for Giant Man. Then we realize that Betty is a fucking bitch who pushes Bruce around all the time. Then she calls him a moron and walks away. I mean, I guess it makes sense though that they'd be a couple, seeing as how 99% of the characters in the universe are fucking pricks. And trust me, Betty and Bruce are definitely in that 99%. Cut to Norway. Fury and Banner land in a helicopter near some big bonfire party, and they walk through the crowd to find a man who calls himself Thor and claims to be a Norse god. And that whole thing is like a big, oh, is he or isn't he an actual god? Is this guy actually Thor? Or is he just some crazy guy who stole a laboratory's prototype lightning hammer axe hybrid? So Fury and Banner talk to him about the Ultimates, but since Thor is a social and political activist who writes self-help books and hangs out with hippies, he shoots down all their offers. Then Banner gets annoyed and starts calling Thor a crackpot, and that he can't believe these people listen to that son of Odin crap. Then Thor just looks at him and asks Banner if he has told Betty that he cries himself to sleep at night, or that he thinks about hurting the Pims for stealing his job. Bruce is shocked and just completely stops and shuts the hell up. Thor tells him that his powers are neither mutant nor machine. And then he causes a thunderstorm and lightning strikes the ground. Then Fury and Banner leave. Weeks later, the Ultimates are sitting around in the rec room shooting the shit, doing absolutely nothing. You see, in the world there is now a team of superheroes to protect it. Except there is no threat, and there hasn't been. And if Stark hadn't made a 2-year merchandising campaign with the government, they would probably be shut down by now. Then to lighten the mood, I guess, Fury brings up this a Ultimates movie, which is apparently in the works. And then Fury starts fan casting all the Ultimates. He says a studio is in talks with getting Brad Pitt to play Captain America, and Cap asks who Brad Pitt is. Then Fury casts himself, and you guessed it, he chooses Samuel L. Jackson. Then he casts Johnny Depp as Tony Stark, Matthew McConaughey as Hank, and Lucy Liu as Janet because she's Asian, and why not? And Janet's like, oh yeah, of course. Who was your second choice, Bruce Lee? And Cap asks who Bruce Lee is. Then Hank, Fury, and Janet try to cast Bruce. They choose Woody Allen, Stuart Little, and then Hank is about to give his when Janet tells him to shut up because Bruce is right behind him. Bruce storms off and Hank says, I was gonna say Steve Buscemi, what's insulting about that? Didn't you know Steve Buscemi was a firefighter on 9/11? Later that night, Bruce is in the city when he calls Betty. He says that he has something important to tell her, but she says she can't talk right now because she's on a date with the Freddie Prinze Jr. Bruce tells her that she is in danger. Basically, Bruce injected himself with a cocktail of the Hulk serum and Cap's blood. Then he falls to the ground and begins convulsing. An ambulance races through the streets. In the back are 2 paramedics using a defibrillator on Bruce. And, well, it works because Bruce wakes up and then he hulks out. So the Hulk breaks out of the ambulance and shouts,
Hulk wants Freddie Prinze Jr.
At the Triskelion, S.H.I.E.L.D. prepares and begins sending out troops while the Ultimates suit up. So the Ultimates are flown into Manhattan with Hank being carried by a helicopter. Fury informs them that the Hulk has murdered dozens of people, drunk a truck full of beer, and is currently stealing the pants off a very fat corpse. Then, it's revealed that Banner injected himself, so the Ultimates had a newsworthy enemy to fight. Luckily, he left an antidote, so Hulk makes it to the building that Betty and Freddy are in, and begins climbing it, screaming about Freddie Prinze Jr. stealing Betty away from Banner, and then he says,
Banner too much of a woman for you, Betty? Maybe it's time you give the Hulk a try, huh? Hulk's gonna get you no matter who they said, Betty. Hulk hornier than a...
And then he's grabbed by Giant Man. It doesn't last long because Hulk breaks out and starts beating the fuck out of him. Fortunately, Iron Man flies by and sends Hulk into an empty Grand Central Station. So Iron Man and Hulk fight, and Hulk rips off Tony's helmet and tries to eat his head. Tony unleashes his suit's Thought Scrambler on the Hulk. Then Tony uses the last remaining power to blast the Hulk out of the building. And then he just goes to wait for a crew to come recharge the suit. So Wasp flies over to Hulk and fucking flashes him and shows off her tiny boobs. Wasp leads the Hulk through the streets until Hulk is crushed by Captain America in his very own Captain America tank, which is immediately ripped open by the Hulk. But Cap starts beating up the Hulk, and then he gets ready to inject the antidote when the Hulk smashes the needle. So Hulk starts crushing Cap and yells,
Hulk gotta smash open your head and suck out the yolk, you ugly piece of crap.
And suddenly, Manhattan is filled with lightning, and a bolt of lightning swoops down into the Hulk, launching him away from Cap and Janet. And Thor stands atop the Hulk, wielding his hammer axe. Jeez, it's like the janitor from Scrubs.
You need to cry. Let's brainstorm. I could hit you over the head with a wrench. Or I could stab you in the gut with the knife. Knife wrench! Practical and safe. Whoa! Oh! Oh!
So Thor slams his haxer into the Hulk over and over and over again. And he asks if the Hulk has had enough. Then Hulk looks over at Thor and says,
Thor's hammer just make Hulk horny for Betty again, hippie.
And then he throws Thor away and runs off. So As Cap and Iron Man are fighting the Hulk, Fury lets them know that Betty and Freddy are in the air. Hulk demands to know where Betty is, and so Cap just tells him, "She's in the air, meatball." And then, like, they look up and they're directly above them, flying by. So, Hulk climbs a building, then he jumps onto the helicopter that's carrying Betty and Prince. Thor asks what Captain America was doing by telling the Hulk where they are, and Cap tells him that he was just getting the Hulk out over the sea in case they needed to nuke him. Meanwhile, Janet is crawling through the Hulk's ear, and she gets to his frontal lobes and does her signature wasp sting, sending him plummeting back down to Earth, crashing into another dock. Cap and Janet finally arrive at the crater to find a naked Bruce Banner begging them not to hurt him. Cap's like, "Don't be ridiculous. I'm not gonna hit you." Pow! Technically, I didn't hit you. I kicked you. In the aftermath of the Hulk's rampage, Fury and Betty go down to the area where they're keeping Bruce, and Betty is like,
Oh my gosh, I can't believe someone could want me so much that they do that to themselves.
"It's kind of flattering, really." "What the fuck? What is wrong with you?" "No, it's not." So anyway, she tells Fury to keep the fact that Bruce is the Hulk on the down low, and then there's a montage of the Ultimates getting interviewed after the battle. Later, Janet is talking to Fury over the phone about a dinner party everyone's going to later that night at Tony's place. Later that night at Tony Stark's place, Cap and Thor show up and Tony leads them into the dining room. While they're walking, Thor notices that there are a lot of boxes around the house. Tony says he's just spring cleaning and that he buys way too much when he is drunk and is giving it away to charities. Meanwhile, at the Pym residence, Janet is trying to get Hank to go to the party with her, but he is currently working on the Ant-Man helmet. Janet's like, "Aw, come on, Hank, you said you weren't gonna work tonight. If you don't want to go, you can at least tell me I look nice." And Hank just fucking looks at her and says, "Oh, you don't want me to tell you what you look like? What, are the push-up bra and high heels for Tony or Rogers?" And then Hank says that Cap wouldn't even flirt with her if he knew what she was. A mutant! And apparently she lays eggs in the bed and goes into like larval nests and other gross like insect shit. Anyways, they start arguing and yelling at each other, and then Hank pushes Janet away, slamming his hand right into her face. Hank's like, "Oh baby, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it." But Janet elbows him right in the face and then hits him with a ham radio. Then Janet shrinks down, starts shooting Hank with her stings. So Hank grabs some bug killer and fucking sprays her. Janet, now naked and being burnt by the bug spray, runs underneath the desk and hides. So Hank uses his helmet to bring millions of ants to just all start biting her. And then Hank looks down with a blank expression and says, "You shouldn't have made me look small, Jan. You shouldn't have made me look small." Back at that dinner party, Thor and Cap are trying to figure out why Tony is Iron Man. Thor thinks it's for some tax dodge, and Cap thinks it's because of all the dames. Tony reveals that he has an inoperable brain tumor the size of a golf ball in the back of his head, and he has anywhere between 6 months and 5 years to live. This is why he is giving away all of his things to charity, and why he risks his life to make the world a better place. And Tony has Jarvis bring a gift for Steve. Jarvis brings him a big cardboard box, and inside is Cap's old war helmet. Cap asks where Tony got it, and Tony tells him that he found it from some woman named Ellen Kowalski, and apparently her father brought it home from the war and said it once belonged to the bravest man he ever knew. Then they all stand up and have a toast. And back at the Pym residence, Hank is sitting on the ground with his helmet off, asking himself what has he done. The end.